Welcome friends, it's Caleigh Bird and I have partnered with the ARC Assisted Living Facility here in Avon Park, Florida to bring you this glorious full room mural using nothing but interior house paint. So make sure you pop that subscribe button and ding the bell so you can be here for all the arts and goodness because I can't wait to show you how I did it. So the ARC is actually a day facility for folks with autism, and I got commissioned to do a tranquil beach scene in the senior room. So first things first, we gotta have that beautiful blue sky. For creating the ocean itself, I decided to start off with a nice deep blue-green in the distance and create an ombre effect for bringing it into the foreground with a lighter tone closer to the viewer. This is also the only place I taped off during the whole painting so that I could get that ultra smooth horizon line. This sand color was something I sort of developed myself. You can see sort of a deeper yellow, green, gray for the shading, and then I just basically used sort of a pink and a light yellow as well as more of a bright yellow along with white just to get a little bit of differentiation. And then I just really tried to use my brush strokes to sort of illustrate the texture of the sand. This was probably one of the first times I think I've ever painted sand, so I was kind of winging it, but I think it wound up turning out pretty effectively in the end. Now where the water meets the shore, I just did sort of a combination of choppy brush strokes, flicking white spatters, using a sponge to soften things up, and then eventually trying to lightly bring in the lapping waves as they look smoothly against the shore. It was a little tricky, but definitely I learned a lot. When creating the palm trees, I did something that I felt was a little bit clever. I'll share with you. If you notice the vertical brown line I have painted there initially, there was actually a seam on the wall where you could tell that two big giant pieces of plywood have met. And since it was quite noticeable on the plain blue background, I made sure to line my palm tree up against it. So I had to sort of attack that seam from all angles to really make sure the paint got in there. But then I loosely contoured the palm tree around it to hide it. Using this little paintbrush dabbed half in dark gray and half in light, I was able to make the adorable little palm tree roots using just single strokes for each one. I felt like this was much easier than trying to go in and paint little tubes shaded perfectly one at a time. And I'm not gonna lie, these palm trees definitely looked a little funny before putting on the palm leaves. And in case you're wondering, I actually did wind up jumping back and forth throughout this mural, but I figured for the sake of making sense in the video, I'm just gonna show you each portion painted all together. Don't even get me started on how difficult it was to paint these palm leaves. Now this was my first time, so it was kind of a learning curve, but it was basically like figuring out a geometric formula for each one because I had to think about how the far leaves, which are the dark ones, would lie, and then I put on the inner seam where all of the little pieces connect, and then I decided to put on the closer leaves in a lighter shade that would be the top side, if that makes sense. So unfortunately, I wound up putting a little bit of extra work on myself because a lot of the farther palm fronds, the underside, wound up not really coming through. I think if I was to do this again, I would leave a little space between each of the leaves of the fronds just so you could sort of see the underside a little bit better. But it was definitely like figuring out mathematical problems, trying to decipher how the leaves would lay on the far side and the fore side, and then also how they would juxtapose within each tree on top of each other or underneath each other. This wound up taking almost a full day just to do the leaves. So definitely mental note next time, leave plenty of time for the palms, my goodness. And now time for the beach chair, which I personally felt like was just about the most important part of this mural, simply because this was the part of the mural that allows the viewer to get inside. I learned many years ago from an art class that if you ever want a person, a viewer, to feel like they can step inside your work, then make a space for them, like leave a little trail through the woods, or put an empty seat on the couch, or an empty place at the table, or some kind of indication of, hey, viewer, you belong here. So I figured, what better way to make a viewer feel welcome than by having an almost life-sized solo beach chair propped up and ready with the best view on the whole beach, just waiting for you to come plop your bottom right in there. Now, if you're gonna have a full day at the beach, you're gonna wanna bring your beach towel and your favorite book. I really enjoyed this little bit of practice creating different textures with the same medium. Obviously, I wanted the beach towel to sort of look like it feels like towel material, and the book, of course, needed a nice smooth binding, just like in real life. But it's just a great challenge considering all you're using is paint and a brush each time, but yet you want to make sure that there is a different visual texture for the viewer to enjoy. I really did enjoy the detail work of painting these seashells. This was a lot of fun. I looked up all kinds of different references. It was hard to choose which beach shells I wanted to represent, but I knew that I wanted them all to be sort of light, pastel-y color, but maybe a little bit more punched up than you would normally find on the beach. And don't forget a bright orange starfish to add a layer of super ultra cuteness. You'll see I do a few different methods, just sort of experimenting with these seashells, really having a good time with it. And then in a few minutes, I actually go through and add just a little bit of shadow beneath all of them to make sure they really feel like they're sitting on the sand. I wanted to create sort of like a little jungle type scene in the corner where the sand would be coming out of, and I decided to use this method I saw online of sort of blending out the background into the sky just to show a real expanded depth, and I figured that it would work quite effectively considering how busy I was going to make the foreground. In the end, I was really happy how it turned out. And I'm not gonna lie, painting these ferns was probably one of my favorite part. I don't know what it is about ferns, something about just the perfect evenness of their leaves. Oh my gosh, doing layers and layers of these ferns was so like hypnotic and therapeutic. I honestly just wanna do like an entire bedroom just like this. So again, with the grasses, I just decided to go from the furthest being dark and then midtones and then a brighter layer closer, just to sort of give this jungle a sense of depth. I wanted to experiment with this because I thought it would be fun to really show depth and detail without actually doing real detail. If you notice, there's no marks or shading within each leaf. It's just about darkest being farther away and lighter being close. I think it turned out for a really great effect. I don't know how else I would have been able to do such a busy scene with it still looking neat, but yet realistic as a plant and not like a homogeneous fake basket or something. Now, for the very last step, I wanted to do a little bit of flowers in there just to sort of give it a nice punch up of color. So I opted to do some bird of paradise flowers, but unfortunately, as I was painting, I wound up running out of batteries. So you just got this one tiny glimpse of me painting the flowers, but then in the end, you will see them fully. So for the tree branch, I used a combination of both doing some shading on the wood branches themselves, as well as using the 3 tones to show some depth within the leaves. I did wind up using a detail brush and putting on some little creases and points of interest, I guess you could call them, on the leaves themselves a little later. But I think that this was a really nice way to show some real mass within the tree and some depth within the leaves without getting too caught up in too much detail. And now I'm adding in the outdoor version of one of my most favorite house plants, the Pothos plant. These are awesome. These vines and their beautiful green and yellow leaves can survive darn near anywhere. I feel like anytime I was out hiking in the jungles of Hawaii, or just strolling along the road here in Florida, or even in my own house, of course, like I said, I see these Pothos plants everywhere. They survive in almost any kind of light. They're so hardy and just so easy to care for. And they're really pretty. I like that they are bright green and then they have these crazy yellow speckles all over them. Definitely one of my favorite plants for sure. And what beautiful sunny day is complete without some nice puffy white clouds. Now I've got to shout out to a fellow YouTuber, Mural Joe, for his great video showing me his cloud painting technique. I would say my clouds are not maybe the best ones in the world, but certainly the best ones I've ever done, and something I think I can definitely continue to improve upon. I realized that the key to painting good clouds is lots of puffiness. You don't want any strong or straight lines. You really want to just dab, dab, dab away. And the key is to add a little bit of depth within the clouds. You want some of the clouds to look a little more distant and some of it to look a little bit more on the foreground. It was definitely a fun learning experiment. For the sake of time, I didn't include actually painting the sails and everything, but I wanted you to at least kind of get a glimpse at how I made the bottom of these little catamaran sailboats look like they were gliding through the water. Hooray, so satisfying. And here are those little bird of paradise flowers that got cut off earlier, tucked in with all of my glorious plant life. I really enjoyed being able to come and paint these giant scale plants. Definitely one of my favorite things in the world. I had such a good time doing this, and the folks that saw it as soon as I was done said they really loved it. We're going to have an opening ceremony at some point, but not quite yet. I really am so thrilled and honored to be asked to create a mural like this, and I hope that I have more opportunities like this in the future. I learned a whole lot. There was lots of little tricks I learned, lots of things that I Googled and some other YouTubers that helped me out, and I'm just so grateful. Check down below for a couple of links of the folks that I watched to learn a few mural painting techniques, and make sure you pop that subscribe button and ding the bell, because I will be here for you next week. Thanks so much, guys.